5 days into the new year 2021, for the first time, let me greet you and thank you so much for creating time for us right here on News Check as we kickstart our first episode this year by looking at the state of the nation. Today we are going to be focusing on the Building Bridges initiative, a product of the March 2018 handshake between President Uhuru Kenyatta and ODM leader Raila Odinga at a time when the country was almost falling apart courtesy of the disputed elections that we had in the country at that particular time. But then the BBI train, some have said, has already left the station. The journey began by the revealing of the BBI report, the first phase of the BBI report. And then we had the validation hearings that were conducted by the BBI steering committee. We saw the public unveiling of the second BBI report that was followed by a signature collection drive that was popularized across the country. And right now what is happening is that the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission is currently verifying the signatures that were collected. The task force maintains they have over 4.4 million signatures. So it's a matter of wait and see out of this how many will be verified and confirmed. That is going to be setting the stage for the referendum that we expect anytime this year. But will the BBI train reach its destination? That's the question many are still asking, especially following a letter that emerged yesterday by Senate Majority Chief Whip Irungu Kangata to President Uhuru Kenyatta, advising him to change strategy on how he's conducting the BBI process, and his co-partner ODM leader Raila Odinga also talking about what many have criticized, that the BBI initiative is unpopular in the Mount Kenya region. So that will form part of our conversation, just reading some, something into what he said, plus other issues that the BBI train has faced on its track to the referendum. Now, joining me to have this conversation, I will be introducing my guest. He's none other than Tom Ojanga. Tom Ojanga is the regional coordinator for KANU in the Nyanza region. And of course, he is a politician and has a wealth of knowledge on matters politics and leadership in this particular country. Thank you so much, Tom, for creating time for us.
Thank you very much, Serfine.
All right. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Is it too late to say that?
It's never too late.
We are meeing in this new year, and I'm glad to see you. We crossed over well. So we start on this political note in 2021. Let's talk about the BBI initiative and the recent development. Of course, it has faced a lot of issues, twists and turns on its track to just sailing towards its destination. But the recent is a letter that was allegedly authored by the Murang'a Senator Irungu Kangata that was supposedly addressed to President Uhuru Kenyatta. And in this letter, the senator seems to be claiming that the BBI is unpopular in the Mount Kenya region. And he talked about quite a number of issues that we'll be discussing. But first of all, your quick thoughts on what came through your mind when you received or saw the letter. It really trended online.
At first, I was quite surprised that Irungu Kangata could write such a letter to the president, given his position in the Senate. But somewhere in the course of the night, I also read in social media that he was refuting the fact that that this letter was assigned to him. So he said this is fake news, it's fake letter. So we can't really know who wrote that, because the purported author has
that's why we're still using the word alleged. But in his Twitter handle, actually, he tweeted in what seemed to be his admission to authoring that particular letter. And just allow me to read the tweet from his handle, just to clear the air. He said, "Kindly, though the letter dated 30th December is authentic, I didn't give it to the media. Someone else who had been copied did. I apologize for that. With the benefit of hindsight, I should have copied no one else. Trust substantive issues raised in the letter will be remedied." This is a tweet that was posted about 11 hours ago in his Twitter handle. So seeming to be...
If he did that, then the letter, what he actually wrote, we must say that is very reckless. Because, number one, fact is that Mount Kenya region contributed 25% of the signatures, which is quite substantial. So you cannot really say 25% of the representative 25% of the population would be really geared towards rejection of that for which they signed. Second thing, there is language that is used in that letter which is not appropriate, particularly in the context of the BBI and the handshake. It seems to be addressing the person is writing and referring to if our son is not in a position of leadership, which has got the tribal connotation, and those are the issues that the BBI seek to address, that we want to create a country that is unified, that is one. And when you start looking at leadership in terms of our son and their son, I mean, we have 42 tribes. We cannot, if each of the tribes want their son, then we must create 42 presidencies at the same time. Mm-hmm. So I think that was very reckless. The language was very bad, so to say, and unprofessional. Does not depict the language of a leader of his position in the Senate, if he admitted
that he did.
However, if it's fake, then of course fake news, fake letters are authored by people who have an intention to either scandalize somebody or create a particular impression or image. Yes.
Going by both possibilities, because yesterday we still, if indeed it was fake or not, still we had governors from the Mount Kenya region, about 10 governors drawn from that particular region, coming out very strongly and issuing a statement that really criticized what the Senate Chief Whip did. And according to them, they sort of criticized the method he used to address the president, to raise these issues, writing a letter to the president, yet he holds a very senior position in government. And even for the Jubilee party, they thought, you know, for them, this was not the best approach. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I also found that to be quite funny, because they did not criticize the letter, they criticized the method used, which was quite interesting, because they said he could have walked to the president, could have done this if he had issues. So they were more concerned about the method. And that, I think, I must say, was quite strange, because fact is the content of the letter is provocative and also not really encouraging. It's not in the spirit of the BBI. And the BBI in itself seeks to bring peace and stability in the country. One may oppose the different sections and the bills, or some of the bills of the BBI, but the objective of the BBI is actually to achieve unity and cohesion, which any patriotic citizen or any responsible citizen of this country may not oppose. We can differ on the different bills of the BBI, but not the BBI itself. There is a difference, because the BBI is actually the process for creation of, is the initiative that seeks to establish or seeks to create peace and cohesion. Now, the BBI as a project had a deliverable, which is the draft bill, or the draft that contains a lot of bills. So these bills are a result of contributions of many citizens. Of course, people cannot be unified in thought all the time. So there are people that prefer one section and another. That's okay. But to dismiss the BBI process in itself, it's very unpatriotic.
But, you know, even if we're talking about, let's not dismiss BBI, but let's talk about the contents. Is the time right for us to do this? Because I had an opportunity to host you a while back.
Yes.
When there was much talk about the train has already left the station. So these conversations that we are having right now, and hearing political leaders saying, these are our recommendations, we propose this and that, is it okay that there's still room or window for change in this particular document, or it's sealed and rubber stamped?
We have to go back to the facts. There was 2 years, a 2-year period in which this country, because BBI is a government project, called on citizens to come and submit their opinions. So your country calls upon you to answer to call of duty of responsibility for your country for 2 years, and you don't answer. Then after 2 years, you say, wait a minute, I've just realized I've got an opinion. I've got a view, which you didn't. You cannot have this window for submission of views to be infinite in terms of time and duration. I mean, it has to be closed so that we move to the next step, and that is what they did. So the proponents of BBI actually, according to the way it's scheduled, 2 years, a collection of signatures, verification of signatures, taking to the county assemblies, and then back to parliament, and then referendum.
So this call for a national dialogue, Tom, what is the agenda?
No dialogue.
Which dialogue? What are we discussing? That's what I want to understand.
Exactly. The point is this: if you missed to contribute your opinions or your views, to give in your views, if you missed, the only reason that you reject what was contributed by others, if you intentionally did not contribute, and now you want to reject what others contributed, that is that's very mischievous, because this country belongs to all of us. If you missed your contribution, please let the views of those who contributed pass, because you cannot choose yourself. You cannot decide to be the judge of how people should think and what people should want in the country. You are not the prefect of the nation to do that. You understand? So I think the discussion as to whether there should be an open discussion on the document, this is past. Right now, the signatures have been collected. The signatures are being verified. It will be taken to the county assemblies, and from the county assemblies back to parliament, and from parliament to the referendum. This process is more or less written on stone. Yes.
The signature collection drive, according to the Building Bridges Initiative Task Force, they managed to get over 4 million signatures.
Yes.
At a time when we're still having talks that a majority of Kenyans are yet to see this bill. Some have seen it, but they're yet to get it in a language that they can understand. So when Kenyans were signing to this document, would you say they were actually making informed decisions about it? I
should think and I should believe that the 4 million that signed at least know what they signed for. That's why they're signing. The signature is a sign of approval of the document, right? And the law only requires 1 million. So this, that's bypassed by 3 million. So I think legally the threshold has been met. The verification should go on and be completed. My concern as a person, as an individual, as a technology person, is that they should, because we have the integrated population register system, which has got a single version of truth concerning population in Kenya. If they put the digital signature against IPRS, they would have that verification in 1 day and cheaply. But that's another story for another day. Yeah, that's a story for another day. So, I mean, there's always argument whether should they do it physically, manually, or can they do it electronically, and electronic verification would have given the results basically in a day or two.
But let me take you back a little bit. Yeah. Would you say that there is adequate supply of information about the contents of the BBI in the country as we speak today?
In general, I think yes.
Would you say you're satisfied that Kenyans really know about this document?
I should think majority, yes. Of course, you don't expect 100% of Kenyans to, because a lot of them, seemingly, there are some who
are still complaining that they've not even seen the report.
Yes.
Some are saying even the first report that was unveiled before BBI Phase 2, we have not seen it. So
in this Kenya, we have a battery of radios, a battery of TVs. 2 years, the government has been saying, the BBI secretaries have said, please go and give your opinions. They went around the country. If somebody, after all these years, didn't even have a clue about what is happening with the BBI, then I'm sorry, we can help.
They should not be part of the conversation?
Yes. Because, you know, there is the responsibility is bi-directional. There's responsibility from the government to provide this information, but citizens must also proactively go and seek that information and read it. It's their responsibility. I mean, the government is not going to assign individuals to come and read.
On your behalf.
Yeah.
All right, we'll talk about that later and what needs to be done then to elevate the awareness about this particular initiative. But let me just take you back as we just conclude with that letter by the senator, just talking about the issues, and some really stood out for me. Just like your quick comment on those few issues. In the letter, Kangata claimed that one of the reasons BBI might fail in the Mount Kenya region is because it is being framed as a Jubilee factional agenda, adding that internal Jubilee problems have been weaponized and are being used to deflect people from the benefits of the BBI, that the differences within the party are now actually trickling down to, affecting the process of the BBI initiative, that everybody is taking it based on their interest within the party and the differences they're having within the party. What do you think about that?
Again, the faction,
being weaponized.
I think, I'm not from Jubilee, but I'll make this comment. I think the faction from Jubilee that is complaining is exactly the faction that did not answer to a national call of duty. It's terrible. 2 years you don't answer to a national call of duty to go and present your views. Then after that you complain. That's ridiculous. I mean, that's mischievous. So I think this has nothing to do with factional differences, but responsibility towards the nation. It has nothing to do with party politics. It's responsibility. If the country requires you to do something, you are obliged to do that.
Do you think the president...
That's a principle of sovereignty.
Do you think the president should actually take charge, like as advised by the senator, in this particular matter, within the Jubilee Party and even nationwide when it comes to the BBI process, and even focusing on his backyard, the central region? Should he take charge? That is what the senator seems to be advising him to do. So has he not done that? No,
the president has got a lot of things in his plate. I think he should be micromanaging the simple things like the BBI. I don't think, this is purely a perception. If Irungu Kangata wrote that, then probably that's a personal view. I don't think he has the intelligence and the network and the capability to be able to get general opinion. He may fail from what his friends tell him, but you only relate to people of your peers. That's not general. I mean, most of the times we judge, we make judgments based on perception, based on what we feel our community of interest say, but that's not universal most of the time. So I don't think that is something that the president should act upon. Should he respond to the letter? As before you answer that, in the letter, Kangata seems to be proposing a parallel supporting structure. He has, like, say, 3 strategies. The first one, he's advising those who are pushing for the BBI process. And in this case, because this letter allegedly was addressed to the president, he's advising him to, sort of have a structure headed by a quasi-politician established to manage MPs, or having a well-resourced office of the Secretary General, or alternatively, the president himself should take personal charge of the process in the region, talking about the Mount Kenya region. So 3 is actually, putting 3 ideas that, number 1, you can form a structure headed by a quasi-politician to manage MPs. Number 2, you can have a well-resourced office of the Secretary General to sell the agenda of the party. And of course, number 3, you can, personally take charge of the process in the Mount Kenya region. Yeah, the underlying message in all the 3 is that the president
What do you think about this strategy?
The underlying message in all those 3 suggestions that the president should provide capital, money, for campaign for BBI. If you look at it, right?
If you read between the lines.
If you read between the lines. So, assigning politicians, of course, you have to provide capital, well-resourced in terms of capital, money. And if the president will be going down there, then all this battery of Jubilee politicians be around. They probably also want to have per diem and all that. So the letter
that's
is actually
debatable, though. That's really debatable.
That's what I interpret
whether
from that.
It's a subject of money or not.
Yes, I mean,
but in the interest of fairness, I asked you what you interpret, so I'll take that.
I think one of the things is that many politicians probably thought there is going to be a lot of campaign funded by the state, but that is not happening. That's not happening. And I think the reason it's not happening is because there is, within the context of implementation of the BBI, we don't want to create a poisonous environment going forward. a divisive environment. So I think this is probably by intention that we have a referendum that is not divisive. And for that not to be divisive, you have to tone down the level of campaigns, right? I think that's what most people probably are not understanding about this. In any case, I mean, there are many things that the country needs to address. There is the pandemic. We also had a lot of people that died during the locust invasion last year. So there's been a lot of things. It's not just the BBI. The BBI seeks to help us going forward in the future, but we also have tactical problems that must be sorted today. Yeah.
All right. So do you think there is anything wrong with the strategy currently being employed to sell the BBI agenda?
I don't think so.
Do you think there is anything wrong about it?
I don't think so. As KANU, we support it 100%. The party chairman has been going around also popularizing BBI, as others have been doing in their way from their parties also. So I think there's a lot of movements across the country, people trying to popularize, parties and political leadership trying to popularize the BBI. So I think that should suffice, that should be sufficient going forward. I mean, you have to understand that those who resist the BBI, those who did not contribute, they don't have monopoly of ideas on how this country should be run. That's why this was taken to the people. But if you're a Kenyan and you refuse to go and give your opinion, then after 2 years you turn to say, my opinion is not, and therefore I have to contribute now. That's being mischievous, right? There's always another day to make those contributions. That's what people must understand. I think we need to bring this country together. We need to push this country together despite the many problems, the COVID pandemic, the locust, and all these other things. There are a lot of challenges that the government needs to address. The BBI is not just one of them, but BBI is very important and fundamental going forward for the future of the country. So I think those who intend to wake up on the day of the referendum to vote no for an opinion which they never contributed to, that's ridiculous. If you didn't contribute, stay at home.
And you seem to be strongly underlining that statement. If you're not part of this process from the onset, stay away.
Stay away. Why?
All right.
You're not the prefect of other Kenyans, so what are you going to vote no for?
Okay, so some have termed this letter personal opinion of the senator. Others outside the Meru Senator Mithika Linturi yesterday saying what the senator was expressing actually represents the views of a majority of Kenyans, but others have termed this move a political risk, bearing in mind that Mr. Kangata is part of the new party leadership that benefited from the Jubilee pad last year. Is he taking a political risk, or is he practicing his democratic right of freedom of speech? Let me speak my mind.
I mean, like I said, that the two positions here, he either created it or may not have created it. If he didn't create it, we should ignore it. If he did create it, then he has reasons why he wrote such a letter. Some people have said he wants to move to Tanga. I do not know. He wants to move to the side of those who oppose the BBI. That's why he did it. I do not know if that is a fact. But from what I've read, it sounds more, if he did it, then it sounds more like somebody saying, hey, Mr. President, His Excellency, we are your men, we are supposed to be going to campaign, but we don't have resources. Please avail some money for it.
No, your way of interpreting this is really taking us to another level. But then, very quickly, tell us, as a political pundit, if you were in a position to advise the president, do you think he should reply? I would tell him, ignore. Ignore this letter. Straight on, ignore. Because it was addressed to him. That's beneath the presidency to really preoccupy himself. There are too many other issues for the presidency to handle. I think he should ignore. Because number one, this one concerns particular area, particular region. The president is the president of the Republic of Kenya. So he should be more concerned about those things that affect us as a people, as a nation going forward, as opposed to tribal community. Let's change a few things. Let's have this and that. Proposals are still coming in thick and fast, even if we are saying the train has already left the station. we've had others even advocating for us to have a multi-choice referendum, that if we give Kenyans a chance to choose from this and leave that, I like this, I don't like this, it may actually avert a possibility of us rejecting the BBI in totality, because some believe it carries some good things. So what is your take on the proposal to have a multi-choice referendum?
Number one, the IBC has not decided that we're going to have a single question referendum. The IBC will decide that at some point. However, from where I sit, multi-choice referenda has been conducted many times. Singapore would not be there if had they not have the multi-choice referendum that creates inspiration to Malaysia and Singapore. So the purpose and the goal of having a multi-choice referenda is to avoid divisiveness. So you have is to achieve inclusivity in a referendum. I would think it's not a bad idea, given the fact that we have a lot of bills within that bill. It will depend on how the IBC will structure that, right? Whatever the case, the multi-choice would allow citizens to vote for those parts only for which maybe they contributed, and leave those parts for which they are not comfortable with.
And then what will be the marking scheme? Won't it complicate matters? In a country where just choosing between the elective posts, you have like 2 candidates vying, say, for a seat in the National Assembly, just choosing between 2, after Kenyans have voted and decided we want A, we want B, just deciding and counting those votes, people would still quarrel about who won or who didn't, which votes were stolen, which ones were not. Now, having a list of questions to choose from, won't it complicate matters?
I think mathematically it's very easy to achieve, because you can say every question, if you have a threshold of 50%, is pass, right? So that's very easy. You just look for the 50% of all the questions. The rest will fail.
To support that question.
Because here it's not 2 people competing, or 2 people competing for a particular bill. The goal is to judge what does the majority want. So you use the principle of democracy, majority wins. So you put a 50%, and any bill that has got more than 50% vote passes. That is how multi-choice referendum is conducted. But like I said, at the end of the day, the experts at IBC they have the people mandated by the Constitution to do that. They will design that, see what is best to achieve the wishes of Kenyans, to achieve a threshold that is acceptable to the citizens of Kenya. Yeah. So I think these 2 options are there. Yeah, there's a possibility. I think.
All right. What if, we also look at the timing of this referendum? Others say, let's have it alongside the 2022 general elections. Others say, it could be anytime this year. What do you think about the proposal to take it to the 2022
the reason
general
we
elections?
had the handshake is because of the disputed elections of 2017. And the handshake gave birth to BBI. So we cannot postpone this until the next election. This is an issue that must be addressed now.
They say it will save cost, it will save time, because currently we are battling a pandemic, and we've we've gone deep into our pockets as a country to fund and even just fund the fight against COVID-19. Can we manage to foot the bill? Having it alongside the 2022 general elections may be one way of, just cutting cost. What do you think about that?
I think there can never be anything so expensive when it comes to the existence of this nation. And I think there's a lot that has been paid. Blood has been spilled just so that we get our independence, which is more expensive than just the money. So I think we cannot reduce measures that help us to have a stable nation, measures that guarantee our existence. We cannot reduce that in terms of financial figures in Kenyan shillings. I don't think that's the right way to go.
All right. I also want us to look at some of the proposals contained in the BBI, report, and just look at what promise they carry for the country. Number one, we have what has been termed as the increase of resources to the counties from the current 15 to 35%. I'm looking at our status, our financial muscle as a country going forward. Do you think we can achieve this if the BBI sails through? Do we have the money?
No, what?
If we cannot, even the 15%, we're still struggling to really meet the threshold as a country.
I think when they say we're going to give 35% of the revenue collection to the county governments, one thing is you just don't give the 35%. Money follows the functions. It will also mean that a lot more functions are going to be devolved from the national government to the county government. And therefore, money only follows functions. You don't send money to counties and then they don't know what to do with it. So you send money to functions.
It comes to the responsibility.
Yes, and that's decided a priori. So money will follow certain functions. What I think will also happen is that there's going to be a lot more devolution and then the money. So if you look at it, whether the difference, the 20% would have stayed in the national government when the functions are the national government, or the 20% that moves to the counties when the functions are still the same thing. Yeah, I mean, people are focusing too much on the percentage, but not what is supposed to be achieved.
What is coming with that increment.
Yes,
but then, do you think that proposal is justified, looking at the status of our counties and what is happening on the ground? Do you think there is a necessity to actually increase, the funds that we channel to the counties?
In general, there is a perception that devolution has failed, which is not true. The purpose of devolution was to address marginalization. As a matter of fact, like I said here last time, the port city of Mombasa and Nairobi were never meant to be counties in the first place because they were never marginalized. So, but now we have the situation as it is. So now, what has happened is that those marginalized areas do not have the organizational structures to even operationalize devolution. The existing the fact that you didn't have systems in place created a situation where there's pilferage. But this has been corrected over the last 7 years. So going forward, you're going to see a lot more counties that are functional. Because at the beginning, I mean, most countries didn't even know, they didn't even have pens or desk or toilet paper, whatever. So they had the money and they didn't have the systems and structures for it. It's human nature. In such a situation, such a chaotic situation, a lot will get lost. Somehow, this happened. But this is part of the evolution of devolution. This was bound to occur, right? So I think as we go forward,
systems are being put in place.
Systems have been put in place. I think from 2022 we would expect more services, and with 35% coming in, I think the people and rural countries are going to be much more happier than they have been.
All right, we really hope that that is a promise that will be fulfilled, but some are really worried about the devolved corruption as well. But we'll pick up from there when we come back. I just want us to go straight to the coastal region. Part of this particular broadcast, we're also following for you some of the events that are shaping the news in the country. One of them include the nurses' strike. We have an update from the coastal region from Michael Bwandiga. We just want to hear what nurses from the region have to say with regards to this particular strike. It's over to you, Michael.
Good morning to you, Serfine. We are coming to you live from Mombasa at Coast General and Referral Hospital. Today, I'm meeting the nurses from Mombasa County. Still, their issues have not been addressed. I mean, their grievances have not been addressed. They've got issues which they have been complaining on, matters to do with their salaries are being delayed, not having proper PPEs, and so much more issues. And I'm joined by leaders from Mombasa County in this nursing fraternity, and they'll be speaking to us and putting into perspective how are things now, taking into account it is the 8th week at the local strike which is going on, and nationally the national strike, it is on its 4th week. And I'm hereby joined by the Secretary General of the Kenya National Union of Nurses, Mr. Peter Maroko. Kindly come forward, sir. Good morning to you. And about today, putting it into perspective, it is the 8th week in this strike. What are the issues on to address today with regard to the Council of Governors?
Actually, we are actually taken back by the Council of Governors letter that was appeared in the media yesterday, that they are not party to the agreements that were entered between the Ministry of Health and the unions, especially Kenya Clinical Officers Union and KBDU. This is a typically cynical of what the government is, and basically they intend to actually not to address the issues that we raised before the government. Issues to compensate our colleagues who have succumbed. It's not a matter that you can discuss for a period of more than 1 month. And this is an issue that is in law, and it needs to be addressed collectively between the national government and the Council of Governors. And when the Council of Governors actually withdraws or delinks itself from the negotiations that were ongoing and which they were party to, it tells us a lot. And as nurses, since we have not entered into an agreement, we need to be cautious of what the Council of Governors is doing. And therefore, we call upon our national officials who are currently engaging the Council of Governors and the Ministry at 2 to actually stick to their guns and ensure that we get the agreement that is applicable to both the national and the counties, so that when it comes to implementation, because the Council of Governors are the ones to implement this agreement, we have to implement whatever agreement that comes out of it. And basically, the issues remains the same, especially on matters to do with the WIBA compensation, that is occupational safety of our members. We still stand with that because there is no another way we can actually appreciate our colleagues who have already lost their lives, because their families need to live on, and therefore the government has to take responsibility and pay all the families that whose colleagues or whose family members succumbs to COVID-19. And the issue to do with the PPE supplies is not negotiable. There's no way we can negotiate for PPEs now. It's the government's responsibility to provide sufficient, right, and quality PPEs for our health workers. Locally, we realize that the government of Mombasa actually has taken to an orthodox means of addressing our issues. We've had meetings with them. They have not been able to address much to do with the remittances, and we call upon them to actually address the issue of remittances. Let them do what they did to Equity. Employees who are earning their salaries with Equity or have loans with Equity have no problem. And therefore, if they did something to Equity that Equity appreciated and actually they have no problem with our members who have loans, then let them do this to Cooperative Bank, KCB, which banks have already deducted all salaries of our members who have loans with them. And since November now, we can say that our members in November and December, they have no salaries at all. So any negotiation that will geared towards addressing issues of health workers here in Mombasa has to address the issue of remittances. And I want to call upon the Chief Officer Public Health and Sanitation here in Mombasa. The approach he's taking on addressing issues to do with health workers is typically out of this world. You cannot threaten members whom you have who are afflicted with your actions. Find a solution before you threaten or before you want to force members who are on leave. You want to ask them to come back. They are part of this strike. And anybody who is on leave and has been asked to go back to work, kindly ignore any call, ignore any letter calling you to go back to work, because the issues affecting our colleagues here who are not on leave that time affect you directly. And therefore, we call upon anybody who has been called to go back to work to actually vacate, because the environment we are working in is unsafe, because the employer has not provided us with the sufficient PPEs, and therefore, even with the safety of our colleagues, you need to exit that area of work so that you are safe outside here until we are able to find a solution on this.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much. And maybe as you are going on with your negotiations, are they maybe there are cases of maybe being threatened for you to be coerced so that you get to sit on with them and agree on issues which you're not okay with?
Yeah. Basically, what we've realized is that there are letters going around asking members who are on leave to go back to work, and I'm told there's a facility in Majengo where health workers are being threatened that their names are going to be sent to the employer. Let them do that. We are ready to face any action, because you cannot inflict on me and expect me to come down and work for you. And basically, what we are telling the county government of Mombasa is actually own up your mistakes. Work on the issues we have raised before you, address the issues collectively and sufficiently, so that we can now have an amicable way of sitting down, agreeing and returning back to work when we have ensured that our members' rights are no further going to be jeopardized.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Marok. And I'm hereby also joined by the Secretary General of the Clinical Officers in Mombasa County. Sir, kindly put into perspective and just how are the issues now, and adding to what your colleague has said.
I want to say that as healthcare workers, because in Mombasa County the strike we are having is for all healthcare workers, the nurses, clinical officers, laboratory, everybody who works at the hospital and the health department, we are all on strike. And I want to say that as healthcare workers in Mombasa County, we still have a long way to go, especially if the government is treating us the way they are doing. We are not happy with the way the issues have been addressed. Nobody has shown concern to the issues raised, and they have shown very minimal commitment into addressing the issues. And maybe a very quick rejoinder on what Oparanya yesterday did through the Council of Governors, by them distancing themselves from the ongoing negotiations. It is very clear that the Council of Governors and the county governments have no goodwill, or they have no commitment at all when it comes to about the issues of health in this country. They are the stumbling block. They are the ones who are ensuring that Kenyans are not getting the right services. And this one now reminds us that we need a way of approaching the issues of health provision in this country, because we've seen the games they're playing, and we want to say that they're rattling us, and we will bite, because time has come that as healthcare workers we stand for what is right. We know what is right, and there's no way we can continue engaging them if they are going to play these mouse and cat games. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. And Serfine, this is how things are here at Mombasa County. Of course, you have had issues from the horse's mouth. Of course, very pertinent issues to do with remittance of statutory deductions, matters to do with PPEs, and of course, so many issues which they have said which need to be addressed. And it's a call to Council of Governors to ensure that they address the issues on time, so that the residents and of course the people of course nationwide, so that these services are given to Wananchi. Of course, they pay their taxes as they put it, and of course they need to be given the services, and of course healthy workers, and of course we have a healthy nation. That's what we have from Mombasa County. And back to you, Serfine.
Thank you so much, Michael Mwadiga, for that report. A healthy nation is a wealthy nation indeed. And that is what, I take as the parting shot there from Mombasa County. As you saw, the healthcare workers, the nurses from Mombasa, just still decrying some of the issues that are affecting them in line of duty, especially now that they've been in the front line in the fight against COVID-19. And so far, they have maintained that they're going to continue with their industrial action until some of their demands are met, which include just demanding for personal protective equipment, talking about pay, talking about promotions, and just the general working environment that they term as unconducive for healthcare workers. And we will just be getting more details about this particular ongoing industrial action by the nurses. The clinical officers went back to work at least just the other day. They signed a deal and, called off their strike, but the nurses are yet to do so, as they still want some of their demands to be met. Before we go back to the political matters we were discussing, Tom, just quickly, just allow me just, also get your quick thoughts on I would say, unfortunate industrial action by the healthcare workers. Right now, we are the heart of a pandemic, and this is happening. What does it speak about us as a country and how we have invested in our healthcare system?
I think, admittedly, I think the fraternity that provide medical care, medical services have been mistreated in some way. We must admit that. There are structural issues that must be addressed, right down from training to how the whole healthcare system is set up to have that. It's not just a question of pay. I am told there are thousands of medical doctors who are unemployed, but I mean, if you're a qualified doctor, you should go back to the villages and start some sort of treating people from the villages. You could have your cottage and start, if you qualify for that. So the reason they don't do that is because there is a general assumption that they are not qualified enough, right? Because otherwise there's no reason of having 3,000, 2,000 doctors unemployed. If we had that sort of system, then we would then have the referral hospitals do what they're supposed to do, to be referral hospitals. And in that case, we'd create a lot of wealth for doctors, and government would not need to have to employ doctors, because then they would be private licensing directly with insurance companies that pay Medicare. So that is what is done in most industrial nations. I know particularly Switzerland, Germany, where I know very well. I went to school in Germany, I live in Switzerland. That's what they do. And I think that would be looked, they should look at all that, how other systems have set up their medical care system. It is unacceptable that you have medical doctors that are tending to people that are suffering from COVID, but they don't have the requisite protection for themselves. This is unacceptable. We really we must admit where there are mistakes, but we need to also suggest improvements on that. So number one, the authorities that run Medicare needs to look at how the entire medical system is structured, right from studies, distribution of doctors, responsibility of doctors, dissemination of Medicare, and how that is linked to the NHIF and all that. Right.
It's really unfortunate that we are talking about shortage of doctors. You've just mentioned quite a number of doctors are unemployed, yet we are complaining about shortage of doctors in some of these hospitals. You've seen overcrowding, we've seen lack of essential drugs and medicine in some of these hospitals. Would we say we do not have enough money to really invest and boost our healthcare system, or there is something that we are missing from this whole conversation? I mean, is it lack of enough funds for us to be able to...
It has nothing to do with funds. It's more to do with how we have structured the system. Because people who have got applied sciences as profession, people who go through applied sciences profession, by the time they qualify, they should actually apply their trade. So they should be certified to go and apply their trade. The government's responsibility is to provide the referral hospitals and equipment and all that, not to employ doctors in there. We must be able to create a system where doctors who qualify are able to go into practice immediately, so that we have regions in Kenya where there's absolutely no Medicare, and yet we have 2,000-3,000 unemployed doctors. I mean, this is a contradiction. So it has more to do with structure as opposed to
whether we have the money or not. All right, away from that, Matt, of course, it's a story we are going to be following up for you very closely as it is going to be developing in the course of the day. Still they maintain they are going to continue with the industrial action. But then now, let's go back to matters politics. And we were talking about the proposal to have resources increased to the counties from the current 15% to 35%. And earlier you talked about what justifies the need for us to increase funds to the counties, and talked about this comes with a lot of responsibility. It's not just about dishing money and saying counties should have more funds, but what more will they be offering the country? What other responsibility will be added to the counties? You talked about that, but some have also been really concerned about the headlines we receive from the counties about public money that has been, sort of spent in the wrong way, stolen, for lack of a better term, corruption cases that hit us on our screens each and every time coming from the counties. Should we still just allocate more funds to counties before we clean up our houses?
I support the BBI 100%. I am not satisfied with the corruption bill in it. The reason we have corruption in Kenya is very simple. It has more to do with the way procurement contracts are structured. The moment any contract that assigns responsibility for delivery and execution with the procuring body creates corruption. In Kenya, what happens is this: if you go in all these courts along the country, there is always a case against the government or some government agency for some claim. And these claims happen like this. We have a contract with the government to provide this and this good. Then we don't supply that. Then we take the government to court for having delayed for 5 days with one payment, and therefore we claim all of this, then we run away with all the money. So the population does not get the service. That's how corruption is created. Now, if you shift that responsibility to the provider, to the vendor, none of them would ever give a bribe. Because they know the day I don't perform, I'll be blacklisted. So it has more to do with how government contracts for procurement of goods and services are structured.
What do we make then of the talks that before you get this contract, what's in it for me? So would you say still that this person who is offering this service or this, whatever it is that they're offering?
If I offer genuine businesses...
Can you hold them to account if you gave them that contract on the basis of what's in it for you?
The point is that if I offer clean services and have the capability, ability, and the resources and mechanisms to deliver that, I will bid for such contracts. If I don't, because the obligation is shifted to me, I would not. So we have a situation where somebody who has never even constructed a path in his own home gets a government contract to construct road. Get about that. So it won't be able to deliver that. So that's where now kickbacks start coming in, because he does not have the obligation to deliver. That obligation, responsibility, is shifted to the one who is paying. But the day that is shifted to the one who is delivering, then you will see 70–80% of the corruption gone. It's not that the Western nations are civilized. It's not that they do not have the genes for malpractice and corruption. No, it's just the law and the systems that have been created that deter corruption. So this idea of arresting people and threatening people here, that won't help. Corruption must be addressed at the very source, and that is at the contract level. Yes.
But how then do we finally slay this monster? It is something that has grown from us. It's always just something we are talking about year in, year out. Corruption, corruption, corruption. In fact, one of the proposals in the BBI is just about addressing this monster, corruption, saying that cases should be, determined in the shortest time possible. I mean, what is it that will act as the silver bullet for us to finally close the chapter of this
if you go
subject?
I think I don't know why this has not been done, but if you go to the AG's office, there's a department for contracts and states that with extremely brilliant chaps. So I asked myself, this obvious thing, why is it not being done? So there must be some people in the country that want it that way. If we want to fight corruption, please go to how government contracts are written. Shift, remove obligation, responsibility from the procuring government body to the vendor, to the supplier, and corruption dies. Yes.
All right. Let's talk about, expanding the executive, some that critics have used to sort of downplay the whole mission of the BBI process, that it's aimed at creating positions for certain individuals based on the fact that it proposes to expand the executive. First of all, what do you think would be the justification of having us do that as a country? And second, if we are looking at this as something that will help us achieve inclusivity, will we really, get to that point based on how individualistic we are as a country? It has to be my tribe, it has to be my clan. If it is persons with disability, it has to be a specific type of disability. If it is a youth, it has to be a woman, not a man. Will we ever achieve inclusion, having that, mindset?
I think it's a good start. It's a good start, I must say. And like all of countries go through different evolutions. We build knowledge-based character, culture, and as we move forward, steered by the BBI and other laws that we have, we're going to create a particular culture in society that would enable us to achieve that society. So all these laws that we create are supposed to help us achieve inclusivity, but they're not the underlying prescription for inclusivity per se. So I think the widening of the executive will create some samplers, some inclusion going forward. Whether that's what we need long term is another question, but right now I think it's needed given the circumstances that we face now. Yes.
All right. We will be talking about more on the promise that the BBI report carries for the nation right after we come from this particular break. But keep interacting with us on social media at KBC Channel 1 and at Serfine_Achieng. That's my Twitter handle. We will be sampling some of your views when we come back. So stay with us as we take the break now.
They're not here. It's sweet. Let me tell you something.
The magic of FA Cup is back with mouth-watering ties as the Premier League and Championship clubs enter the competition in the third round. KBC Channel 1 will ensure you don't miss out, live and exclusive on your True Sports partner from the 8th to 11th of January 2021 as we kickstart the new year with you in mind. Save the dates for the best and route to the finals.
Muone Faisal ndio aliwekelea bid ya TV na ndio hii anaenda nayo. Faisal, hebu tuambie ni vipi uliwekelea bid?
Nilienda kwenye website ya Quickbid. Nikatizama nikachagua kuwekelea kwenye TV. Sasa niliwekelea mara 3. Nikaja kwa mshindi, nikakutana bid yenye imenifanya kwa niko mshindi ilikuwa ni 168. Sasa leo nikaitwa nikachukua nichukue TV yangu.
Haya Faisal, mali yako.
Tukusaidie.
Asante.
Jiunga na Quickbid ni rahisi. Enda kwenye M-Pesa, bonyeza paybill kisha weka business number 4032353. Kwenye account weka kodi ya bidhaa unayotaka na bid yako ya chini zaidi. Kwa mfano TV 16. Kisha weka shilingi 20 tu kama idadi yako. Weka bid yako pia kwenye www.quickbid.co.ke. Kumbuka, bid ya chini zaidi ya kipekee ndio ununua. Quickbid, bidhaa bora kwa bei ya chini.
Get ready for a 3 weeks Africa Football Feast as the new year kicks off with the 6th edition of the African Nations Championship in Cameroon. From the 16th of January to the 7th of February 2021, 16 teams from the continent will be spread across 3 cities as the best players from domestic leagues showcase their talents live on KBC Channel 1. Let's support our own. Tonight on KBC Channel 1.
I would like you to conceptualize the campaign launch of a new coffee product and base it on the concept that I call 3-in-1.
I don't think we should get married.
What?
There's another woman in my life.
That she got into an accident on the day that she tried to abandon her husband in order to flee with.
With who, Mrs. Cello? With whom was she fleeing?
My love, I haven't heard from you in a long time. I see that your son still remembers who I am.
Welcome back, and thank you so much for staying with us today. This is News Check. In case you're just joining us, we have been talking about the state of the nation, and we just kickstarted this conversation by talking about matters BBI. A lot has been discussed on this particular platform, which we will be picking up in just a bit with my guest, Tom Ojanga. But right now, we also want to follow up on something that has been developing this week. For the first time, after about 10 months, schools reopened their gates for the first time for learners beginning yesterday. And we have our reporters scattered in different parts of the town just to, get to understand what is happening with regards to the school reopening process. Right now, we want to get an update from Wycliffe Okech, who is currently at a tea room right here in Nairobi, just to look at the transport situation. A very good morning, Wycliffe. Just bring us up to speed with what is happening right now. Yesterday, you reported low, turnout of learners and their parents traveling to various destinations. Compared to today, what is happening?
Good morning, and we are coming to you live from Tea Room bus terminus here in the CBD in Nairobi, the 5th day of January 2021, and this being the second day of schools reopening. I tell you, this place is really packed. Unlike yesterday, which was the first day of reopening, we were not able to spot many students, unlike today when students are here all over, like some accompanied by their parents, some on their own. And one thing that has revealed or manifested today is the issue of hiked bus fares. Earlier on, you remember that on Sunday, during the inter-ministry briefing, CS for Transport, CS James Macharia revealed that they negotiated with the matatu operators not to hike fares to facilitate movement of learners. But then again today, from the few people we have spoken with, there is hiked fares, something that they decry, but then they really have to make do with that if the learners have to get back to school. And just to paint a picture of what is the situation here, let me bring one of the parents on board, to help us understand everything here. Karibu ndugu.
Asante.
Labda uanze kutueleza majina yako kamili. Na
majina yangu ni Richard Mugambi na mimi ni mkaaji wa Nairobi.
Labda usongetoa hapa tuweze kuelewana vizuri. Okay. Umeleta wanafunzi ili aweze kufika shuleni. Nimeweza kufika hapa saa ngapi?
Nilifika hapa saa 4 kamili na mpaka sasa hatujapata gari.
Weza kufikia hapa karibu. Bado mjaweza kupata gari mpaka sasa?
Bado tujapata gari. Kuna a lot of confusion sababu kila mwanafunzi anarudi, inaonekana wanafunzi wote wanarudi the same day. Na hii imeleta changamoto kubwa kwa wanafunzi na wenye sekta ya magari, sababu magari hayatoshi sababu ya kuweka social distance.
Na kwa upande wa nauli unaweza kuongea nini?
Kwa upande wa nauli, kama kawaida nauli imepandishwa. Kawaida kutoka hapa kwenda Bishop Gatimu, we normally pay 400 shillings. Sasa hivi nauli imepanda mpaka 1000.
Kumaanisha iwapo hawataweza kumudu nauli, uko na mpango gani?
Inaonekana kama mtu hana uwezo wa kulipa hiyo nauli, itabidi arudishe mtoto nyumbani.
Sawa, asante kwa nauli yako. Dada, labda uweze kutueleza majina yako na shule unapoenda.
Majina yangu ni Rispa Kimenju, nasomea katika shule upili ya Gandu. Na ningependa kusema kwamba tumefurahi kurudi shuleni, ingawa tumekosa magari na tunashukuru serikali kwa kutusaidia tuweze kurudi shule na kuendelea na masomo yetu.
Na matarajio yako ni gani unaporudi shule?
Natarajia kwamba tutaendelea na masomo vizuri, ya kwamba tutaweza kufanya mtihani wetu wa kitaifa vyema na tuweze kupita. Na ningependa kwa wish success candidates wote class 8 and form 4. Yes.
Bila shaka. Na kutakia kila laheri unaporudi shule pia.
Asante.
Just from what you've heard, one of the parents that I've spoken with, his account is not very different from other parents that we spoke to earlier on. The issue of fare is something that is revealing itself here, and many parents are decrying that issue. From the parent that we have had, going to Renyages cost, initially it was 400, but then today is almost double. They're charging 1,000 for the same route, something that both the learners and their parents have really decried and complained about. But the operators say the issue has been occasioned by the government directive for the buses, for the vehicles or the passenger service vehicles to operate in half capacity. And something that is also revealing itself here is the issue of social distancing in matatus, or rather these passenger service vehicles. From what we have observed so far, most of the vehicles are observing that the social distancing issue, and that they're requiring that all the passengers who are getting on board wear their masks. But then again, the issue of water points and sanitizing. Yesterday we were able to spot quite a number of water points, but then today we are not seeing those. I guess this is occasioned by the high number of learners, but then we hope that all the protocols will be observed even as our learners get back to school. We will continue monitoring this issue and update our audiences in our subsequent bulletin, but then from now, that is what we have observed so far, and we head back to you.
All right. That is Weekly for Kitch reporting to us from the Tirun bus terminus right here in Nairobi. Just generally looking at the state of affairs, day 2 after schools reopened for physical learning after the long break that was occasioned by the COVID-19 break. Concerns have been raised about the safety of learners, the preparedness of schools, and whether, this is going to be sustained. We will be, just keeping a close eye on that particular matter for you as well. Thank you, Wycliffe, for that. Now, we just want to talk about that a little bit. It's back to school, and it's the rush to go back to learning. I don't know, maybe your quick comments on the status of the country and the preparedness of the schools across the country. Was the time ripe for us to reopen? You've seen some of the challenges that have been reported so far since yesterday.
Well, I think, not everybody in this country has got the possibility for accessing online education and also remote education through channels that are available today, Zoom, Teams, Google, and all that. So I think, looked at that way, it's good that the schools have reopened. However, I think the government needs to do a little bit more to protect the children from the pandemic. Congestion, we knew we had the situation. We could have probably built more classrooms, but let's see what happens going forward. There should be rapid reaction mechanism if such a situation will arise in which a school infection, COVID infection would occur in a particular school, because then this replicates itself very quickly. The kids going back home and all that, and before you realize you have the pandemic becomes really real. So I think let's see what happens, and more should be done in terms of creating measures that protect the children and their parents, of course. Yeah.
There's still schools that are still facing the challenge of achieving the social distancing that, as one of the directives that could avert the spread of COVID-19. You know, ordinarily, even before COVID-19, in this country, you may not have gone through the sufferings that learners are going through in this country. But some learners even learn under trees. Others have to share desks. Others have to learn in very pathetic conditions. So right now, it's really becoming quite a tall order for some of these schools that are operating under such unfortunate situations to implement the COVID-19 directives. It's proving to be a costly affair. What would you say, that can be done perhaps to assist such vulnerable schools?
I think it doesn't make sense to go to the past. What has happened has happened. The mistakes that have happened has happened. I think rapidly the government should, from a technology perspective, try to explore the possibility of what you call off-grid computation technologies, because this is pretty cheap. And if you can install that solar-based in all these rural schools, and through that you could have panels in which then people, do learning. And then, of course, encourage parents to have per household one smartphone from which they can then interactively use. That would minimize the effect of creating disparity in this country between the rich and poor, because right now rich kids will be able to go to school and poor kids will not be able to get to school, and that then creates the gap, which the government is trying to close. I mean, we will create a terrible social gap in terms of income, in terms of learning, in terms of social capabilities. So we must be really careful, see how we handle and how we train and educate our children. We should not have a nation in which you can only be educated if your parents can afford this and that. Yes.
Talking about affording and all that, this COVID-19 really brought to the fore the inequalities that were there when it comes to matters education, especially what you've just talked about on technology. We will be talking about what can be done to levelize the ground for learners in the country, just for us to have an equal opportunity for every child, every learner in the country. But right now, let's just go to Jamhuri High School. I understand Kamche Menza is currently with a principal, just looking at the situation at secondary schools in the country also. Kamche, bring us up to speed with what is happening. What have you gathered from your spot check this particular morning, day 2 as schools reopened?
Well, Serfine, good morning, and like you said, we are coming to you live from Jamhuri High School, where I'm joined by the principal, that is Fred Awar. And basically what is happening today is that today is day 1 of high school. The high scholars, they are reporting to school today. Yesterday we saw the pupils in primary school reporting to school, but today we understand it's the secondary school learners. And basically what we are trying to look at is what are some of the measures that the schools have achieved. This is a public school, it's a boys' school, and we understand that they have reported, and students are still reporting. But we are here to see what are some of the measures that they have taken in line with the COVID-19 protocols. Have they achieved it? Do they still have challenges? But without further ado, let me bring on board the principal of this school just to bring us to speed on what exactly is happening here. Karibu. Maybe you can start us off with how many students do you have?
Yeah, out of the almost 1,200 students, to be precise, 1,169 students. So far we have about 1,050 who have already reported, and that's almost 90%. And we are hoping that by tomorrow or Thursday latest, we shall have all our boys in, maybe 98. We are still going to find out those who have not reported what is the issue. There are those who are called by the parents that they are having challenges in transport, and some will be arriving later in the day and others tomorrow, and about 1 or 2 who are going to come in on Friday. But I must thank the parents, thank the students, and were eager to be back to school. And like yesterday, we had about 700, out of the 700 boarders, 610 came as of yesterday evening, which was very commendable. And of course, a number of them have come this morning. We are hoping that everything should normalize by tomorrow. Today we are doing a lot of counseling. The class teachers and the guidance and counseling group are talking to the students, especially the Form 1, 2, and 3, so that they can come back. You know, after 9 long months, the mood of reading may not be there, but we are trying to make them come back to life in school. And then we will be able to start off probably in the afternoon or tomorrow morning. So today is just a case of cancelling the lower classes. The Form 4s are set. Yeah, they are going to be doing their assessments by starting tomorrow, the tests, which they finished when they left on the 23rd, and we are moving with them. For Form 4s, they are focused, and I think we are happy that so far we have not had any major challenge. In terms of the mask, basically all our students have masks. Those who did not have masks, we had a few, and we have already handed over to them. There have been the challenge definitely is within the classes, and we are hoping that where the classes are big enough, are excessively big, we are going to have tents put in the field, and there are even some across in the quad, which students can use, especially with elective subjects. And we are hoping that we should be able to maintain the distance, especially when they are in the field. But with over 1,000 students and they're getting out at the same lunch, we have just been having a meeting to see how best we can be able to serve them the lunch so that there is no much crowding. That's what we are dealing with, so that we have the best social distancing that we can get.
Okay, how many with about, you said 1,169 students. How many classes do you have, and how many students are in a class?
Yes, we have the Form 1 to 3 are 8 streams, basically roughly with the average of 45 in a class. The Form 4s are slightly fewer. There are 6 streams because 2 streams were added in 2018. So averagely, we have about 2-3 classes with over 50. So those are the ones we are seeing if we can be able to split them and put them in tents. Which we have. We started this last year, so we will be able to assess the situation today and come up with the best policy for us to use under these circumstances.
Okay, you spoke of a good gesture, I must say, about cancelling the Form 1, the Form 2s and the Form 3s. Yes. Why do you think this is important?
You know, it is important because some of our boys were doing manual works. I know others were in the quarries, others were doing matatu business, they're in town, others were doing business, so they're already used to getting money. So it's important we bring them. There are cases of our students who lost loved ones through COVID-19 or other issues, so we must also counsel them to come back and know this is part of life. There are those who may have had challenges, okay, back at home, varied, right, where they are. We know some come from very poor backgrounds, and they must have had major challenges. So we must counsel them and bring them to speed on what is happening, because that is a duty. You don't just start teaching the child who may have been having some other underlying issues. So it's good to know that and just help them to come up into the mood of back to school. 9 months is a pretty long time.
Okay, maybe one last question. We understand that some private schools may have closed down due to the COVID-19 pandemic issues. This is a public school. Yes. Are you likely to have admissions?
Yeah, for those, there are requests we started getting last year, okay, towards the end, and we have told them to come back on Thursday to just look at we assess the situation, because we can only have additional students where there is space. So if there are also a few boys who may have wanted to go elsewhere, we'll be able to know that by tomorrow. Then on Thursday we can now know, okay, how many vacancies do we have, or if we have any, if there are any, yes.
All right. Well, Serfine, you heard it from the principal of the school saying that there is a good turnout of students here. The Form 1s, the Form 2 and the Form 3s. Remember, the Form 4s were back already since last year when the in-person learning started for the Form 4s, the Standard 8 and the Grade 4 learners. And what they are saying is that now there is no learning per se, but basically counseling for these learners, which is actually a good gesture. And we'll be moving to different public schools to see whether this is happening or this is actually unique to this particular school. And that's it from here. Serfine, back to you in studio.
Thank you so much, Kamche Menza, for that. Of course, it's an update that she's bringing to us from Jamhuri High School. She was talking to the school principal on the state of preparedness that they have set up as a school just to receive learners back to school. According to Kamche, she's saying today actually is when the school has officially reopened its gates for learners. And on this first day, there is no much learning that is going to take place. What is happening is a counseling session for all the learners who are coming back from the long COVID-19 break. A lot has happened, and you know, she's going to be traversing other schools in the course of the day just to give us also a picture on what is happening today. We will be giving you regular updates as we proceed. Now we have been in studio with Tom Ojanga. Tom, you know, sort of turned you into an educationist for a little bit, but I know you have a lot to share with regards to the state of the nation. And I'd just like us to pick up from what you were talking about earlier. You've heard from Jamhuri High School there, their state of preparedness, and we talked about what COVID has taught us as a country. And one of the things that really came out, and it was a loud message, was the inequality that we have in our education sector, when some learners could access online learning while others could not afford to access online learning. And this would really trickle down to what message it sends about what we have done to make sure that our learners have equal opportunities. I don't know what you'd have to say with regards to how this can be achieved.
You know, the fact is that after the pandemic, we will never revert to the normal. The way we're going to live going forward, the way education is going to be distributed and also given to school-going children has changed.
This is our new normal.
This is the new normal. So anybody that is thinking that we're going to go back, that is going to end, and then we go back to the old normal. That's not. The government and the people responsible must now plan on the basis of experiences that we made last year. All right? Now, we must be cognizant of the fact that there's a danger of creating a very big gap in society. The inequality gap might extend, because if you have children whose parents are able to afford certain facilities or certain schools that can provide certain facilities, and yet all of them sit the same exams with the ones who are seated under a tree somewhere, you know, it means the other ones will be disadvantaged. Not necessarily that they're not intelligent, but because they don't have the facilities. So we create a situation where we lock some people in a circle of poverty, and we enable some people to enjoy the fruits of our independence and nation. And this is wrong.
So how do we change the narrative?
If you ask me, number one, which I will say it on TV first, the government must abolish for-profit education. For-profit education. For-profit education and private schools are two different things. The Catholic and the church systems have been providing non-profit private schooling. Now you have for-profit school systems that eat on the resources that are available for society. This automatically creates or widens the gap of inequality. So the first thing to address this, the disadvantages that it creates, the disruption that it creates in society, and the problems that it will create in the future, abolish for-profit education completely.
But this would affect quite a number of private schools.
People's businesses. But we are talking about society. You cannot make the future of our children a business, a profit business.
But can we be able to sustain such an education system just depending solely on the public schools? Can we be able to sustain that?
The most developed nations have the best public school systems.
But
Why?
look at our public schools and
yes,
our public school
because
situation in
because
this
the people who run profit education are the people who also design education for society. Most profit institutions are run by people who are also in the education business and education profession, and that conflict must be addressed. We must face it. Profit schooling system does not give us the best education. It's the responsibility of the government to provide education, so we must shift that. And education is a human right. It's a social right across the nation. So it must be distributed and given out equally.
All right.
Yes.
I know that is something that if it was to be adopted in this country may take years just to implement, but in a day, really, just it will affect quite a number of private schools. And just looking at some of the lessons that COVID has taught us, public schools really play a very big role, especially now. Most of these private schools have closed shop because they could not financially sustain themselves over the long COVID-19 break, and learners have had to been left with no option but to enroll in most of these public schools, which are now complaining of being overcrowded and having an influx of learners. So something really needs to be done to address this issue. But talking about inclusivity and equality, let's go back to politics right now. That is where you thrive. And you know, there is talk of having us if the BBI is adopted, let's elect one senator who is a male and one senator who is a female, and let's abolish the women representative post. Is this something that is viable when it comes to the conversation about gender equality? Let's meet the gender threshold in the country. Can this formula work for us? Can it solve the problem we have been having for centuries?
I think we must accept and agree that there's been inequality between the different gender in this country due to whatever reason, cultural or historical reason. However, you cannot address inequality through the Constitution. You may address it through actions that are constitutional based, like affirmative action, but now creating a particular position in Parliament by Constitution, it may be right now, but I think going forward at some point that probably will have to be re-looked at. Right now it might be necessary, but you do not address inequality constitutionally. You address it through affirmative for targeted action, right? Because the Constitution should be applicable to all equally. So you cannot say, well, the Constitution creates only this for a particular group of people. Then it would be unconstitutional because it means it discriminates others on the basis of their gender or whatever culture. So I think, I think for as much as we accept that, we think it will help to address the sort of gender imbalance in politics. Maybe after some 10 years, 20 years, might have to be looked at again.
All right. We're coming back to pick up that conversation as well, but just allow me very quickly to speak to Irene Muchuma Odim, who has also been following up on the situation of the reopening of schools today. She's currently at Kasarani. Let's just cross over there. Irene, a very good morning. What do you have for us?
Serfine, how are you from wherever you are? We are coming to you from Kasarani area, and we are here to establish the state of affairs in a number of schools in the area now that the schools reopened yesterday following the national government's directive to have full reopening of learning institutions. Each and every pupil and student is supposed to be back to school, and we are at Kasarani, a group of schools. We would like to establish the greatest challenges, especially on social distancing. Is this affecting also the private sector with the weight that is affecting the public schools. Yesterday we witnessed a lot of challenges in a number of public schools that we visited, right from the county of Kiambu to the county of Nairobi, and also the county of Nyeri, where the issue of infrastructure, whereby a desk that is supposed to hold 2 students or pupils is now holding 3 learners, and this is a great challenge when it comes to social distancing. Serfine, remember the Cabinet Secretary for Education himself said that even as we reopen schools, the issue of social distancing will be a challenge. And first thing that will go into many parents' minds is how will these kids operate, especially when they go to the playground. But before further ado, I'm bringing in the director of Kasarani Group of Schools. Madam Director, introduce yourself and tell us the challenges that we are going through now that schools reopened yesterday. So far, how are we faring on?
How are you, everybody? My name's Irene Kamau. I'm the school director at Kasarani Junior School, Kasarani Group of Schools. Here where we are in our dining area. Our children are having their meals. Social distancing after they came in is something that we are taking very, very seriously. We are ensuring that the children are going for meals in shifts. As you can see right now, we are only having 2 classes for their meals, so they go for meals in shifts. So we've had to adjust our timetable to allow as few number of children to come to the dining, as opposed to when we would have the whole place filled up. We've removed most of our tables so that the tables that are there are just one position singly, each table stand alone, so that each table can hold 3 learners, so that we don't have congestion. The other thing we have done for purposes of social distancing is markings on the floor, so that everybody is able to know that we are expecting a 1.5 meter distance. I think the biggest challenge would be to change the mindset of the children who are used to being grouped together, to understanding that now they can now not hug, they cannot go walk together, they cannot hold shoulders to show that they are buddies. That is what we are grappling with at the moment, changing the mindset of the children and of the teachers so that they can understand the new challenges and the new normal.
Of course, when you came back to school, there was that excitement between the parents and teachers and pupils themselves. You know, I've missed you for quite some time. 9 months was not a walk in the park, especially for someone you've been close to. But especially when it comes to the playgrounds, does it mean that now we will have to cancel the break times?
Actually, we got a circular from the Ministry of Education yesterday, the day before yesterday. It was circulated to us from our DO's office that all events in the schools must be cancelled. You cannot have games, you cannot have those events that require people to sit together and be in large crowds. All of them have been cancelled as we are speaking. So yes, we may not have that. However, there are certain games that can be done, maybe indoor games, maybe outdoor games, but that do not necessarily require people to be together, like if you were to do sack races or some races in the field. But even that, we are still very cautious. We first need to get the children to understand that they cannot be together at one place at one time. And also we need to get to the point of sanitizing. So we are fumigating. The whole of yesterday we had fumigators all over the place, so that we endeavor to fumigate once a week, so that they just come and they sanitize the whole place. And actually in the vehicles, they sanitize the vehicle, the buses, before the children get in. After the children are dropped for the first trip, before they go for the next trip, they sanitize the same buses. In the classrooms, the same. You have a thermogun almost everywhere, in the dining hall, in the classrooms, at the gate, every place, checking the temperatures. And then we have also created a holding room, which is a COVID-19 response room, where in the event that the temperatures of a child are above 38.5 or 38, we send a child there to the school nurse in the holding room. That holding room is also connected to a known dispensary in the area, AAR, so that in the event that there is need to evacuate, an ambulance must be standby to evacuate those learners. For us, we had done this because the Kenya Private School Association had given a list of things that they are are advising their member schools to do in order to be prepared. The food handlers are also supposed to have a COVID-19 certificate. So all our staff were taken to Kasarani dispensary, and Mama Lucy, doctors from Mama Lucy hospital, they were able to check our teachers, and all our teachers are COVID-19 checked, and we have their certificate because it's a requirement. That is the same thing for the food handlers. On top of the normal certificates they get from the Nairobi City Council, they also get the food handler certificate compliance of COVID-19.
Thank you, Madam Director. Serfine, another thing that it could be going through many minds is the issue of sanitizers. The national government requested the parents to pack for their children the sanitizers. But you know, these are components with dangerous products, and this is one thing that teachers will have to be very keen, especially when pupils come in to school. The private sectors was not largely affected compared to the public sector. This in terms of learning institutions, because many private schools, especially in this area of Kasarani, shut down, closed business, and said parents have to relocate their children to another school. But even this, as it comes with multiple expenses, another challenge, Serfine, will be finding this institution, finding another institution for your child, and also ensuring that we are up to the number, because like at Kasarani Primary School, at Kasarani Group of Schools, I beg your pardon, where we are right now, I'm told there are 500 pupils already. And considering that most of the private schools in this area closed shops after the announcement of the first COVID-19 case in mid last year, most of these parents are expected to come here to do the inquiries, to have their children registered to this school. That means the number will go up, and social distancing, the issue of controlling the movements of these pupils will be of great concern. Serfine.
Thank you so much, Irene Mchuma Odim, for that report, painting a picture of the dilemma that we face right now as a country, as private schools, quite a number of private schools that were drastically affected by the devastating impact of the COVID-19 pandemic became financially crippled. Some of them, as schools reopened, could not open their gates for learners because they could not sustain running the affairs of the schools. So learners in these schools were left in a state of limbo. Others have opted to seek admission to other schools at a time when a majority of schools are still lamenting over how they are facing a challenge in implementing the social distancing directive. Now, how will they allow more learners into these institutions? That's a big dilemma that many schools are currently facing. Irene will be coming back to you as you continue with your spot check across several schools this particular morning, just to look at the situation. But in studio, we have talked about matters politics, touched on matters education, but allow me now just take you back to the political aspect of our conversation this morning. We have been talking about the BBI initiative, and today I've been talking to Tom Ojanga, the regional coordinator for KANU in the Nyanza region, and he was sharing with us your wealth of knowledge on some of the, interpretation of some of the issues that are emanating from the BBI conversation. And earlier we were talking about the issue of achieving gender equality. One of the proposals in the BBI is to have one, in the senatorial post, let's have one male and one female candidate vie for these positions, as sort of a way to bridge the gender gap in the country. And you were saying that this could actually not really work for the long term going forward. I just wanted to pick from there as we continue.
Gender equality is not only as concerns political positions. I mean, it's universal across, because the reasons we have the inequality are cultural, traditional, political, and many, many more reasons. And this begins from the family setup, the village, and what have you. So to address gender inequality, measures must be taking affirmative action measures to address this. Now, what they have done in the BBI is to have a constitutional provision for certain positions in the Senate to be created for women. This is good in the short term, because in our tradition, the women leave their homes to marry into another home, so they begin their disadvantage in the sense that the constituency that votes them, they have left to go and acquire. So the men start from an advantage position. So this is, and as Kenya becomes more solid, more one nation and all this requirement won't be there in the future, I suppose. So I think this is a temporary arrangement, which is good, but whether we'll need it in 20 years or so, I doubt.
It's a matter of wait and see. Abolishing the women rep position, if you look at that position and the role it has served, some really criticized and asked, you know, what are the women reps doing anyway? Do you think it was a relevant position? Did it serve, you know, the purpose of which it was intended? And should it even be abolished as it is proposed by the BBI?
It was called the woman rep, but it did not actually mean that it was served for women. Even men could have become a woman, but no man really ran for it. So I think it was, you know, they created a situation where the woman rep is actually the MP for the county. We have constituency MPs. So there are two members of parliament for the county. One was a senator and one was the woman rep. So what they have done is they've removed that from the lower house to the upper house. That's all. That's what they've done, except now they've reserved that specifically for a woman. Before it wasn't reserved for a woman. So what people really did not understand is that we had two MPs, members of parliament, senators of parliament. So the senator in the upper house and the woman rep in the lower house. But now all of them are going to the upper house. That's what has happened.
That's no much difference from where you sit. You know, correct me if I'm wrong, but this one woman senator and one male senator, there has not been clear elaboration on who will be doing what and who will be deputizing who. So clearly there is nothing that has been put on the table to show this is the much I can do, this is my boundary, these are my duties. Won't it bring a conflict of, you know, sort of running affairs without having that clear description on, like it was before, the senator, there was a clearly laid out, you know, this is what the senator does, this is what the woman rep ought to do. Whether they did it or not, that's a question for another day.
The roles of the senator are defined in the Constitution. Now, when we create a woman senator in the Constitution, I think this is, when we create a woman rep in the Senate, from the woman rep from the National Assembly, it's just shifting the position of that woman from the National Assembly to the Senate. So now that woman will have more responsibilities as a senator, besides that as representative of the county.
All right. Yeah. Let's talk about, you know, talks that have shaped the news as well on our disunity in our quest for unity as we continue disagreeing on what should be in the BBI, what should not be in the BBI, when should we have a referendum, at what cost, at what expense, now or in 2022. Are we really genuine about our quest for unity, and can we achieve that unity that we so desire as a country, going by what has happened just through this BBI process?
This will come naturally. I think we must understand that this unity that we have in Kenya exist in Kenya, even though we exist in the same region as Tanzania, it doesn't exist in Tanzania. That means this was actually a political creation. It's not a natural thing that we have this unity. So now, the bigger chunk, the number of new generation that's going to take over and vote really do not care about this units and tribal alliances. So there's already a disconnect between the new Kenya and the old Kenya, even though the BBI is driven mainly by people that are predominantly older. I think there is a disconnect between where we're going and what we should do with regards to this unity. Fact is, to have capital grow, you need to have stability. Therefore, you have to address the matter of disunity. Therefore, it's important. But I think we need not focus too much on tribal disunity, because this, sooner or later, this is becoming irrelevant. Actually, it's dead talk, you know. And why it's still being talked about, tribal alliances, it's irrelevant. Its relevance is really minimal because it's dying. It may have been important for the politicians of the past decade, but going forward, this is not going to be an issue.
Do you think that there's been too much excitement and political rhetorics around the BBI process that have shifted our focus on what the initiative ought to be about, the contents and really the foundation of the BBI process?
Yes, because we still have a lot of old school politicians that think in terms of tribal lines and tribal alliance. And so the issue of disunity is to an extent also overblown. The younger generation of Kenyans actually do not have this. In fact, they don't even understand what people are talking about. So this is still understood by people who predominantly were born before Kenya became a republic, right? Because this sort of divide and rule mentality, tribal mentality, was inculcated by the colonial government. And those people who are born in that generation know it better than those who were born in the Uhuru generation or Kibaki generation, because they didn't have to go through that. You understand? So while we have that generation still thinking it's a major factor, I think, in my opinion, the new Kenya that is coming this year, next year, post-2022 election, won't care so much about it, because it won't be a factor. I mean, there's a lot of intermarriage already. There's a lot of mix-up. There's a lot of movement across tribal border movements that really dispels this. Where I come from in Ouma Bay, it's so cosmopolitan that my neighbors are either Kikuyu, Kisis, and what have you. It really doesn't make a difference because you all grow out. So this is just that somebody speaks as the knowledge of another language, but not the person. You know?
You have the same blood.
Yes.
You belong to the same country.
But, yes.
You know, so there are plans that there's going to be a rollout of, education and awareness around the BBI document going forward as on the road to the referendum. How do you advise this conversation be guided? Leaving aside the politics and everything, how do you advise the leaders or those who will be in charge of conducting this awareness campaign? How should they trade on this particular journey so that we really take advantage of the opportunity we have to learn about it?
Awareness campaigns presupposes that people are not aware, which is not entirely true, because Kenyans are really aware of what the BBI is all about.
Are they?
At least
I started by asking. Yes. I'll still ask that question.
I think Kenyans are aware about what the BBI is. What may bring confusion is the benefits of the BBI in its entirety. There's a lot of traction, a lot of movement, cross-party movement on sensitization of the population. I want to hope that by the time we go into a referendum, there's going to be discussion also in the county assemblies, and the county governments are also going to talk about this, and they're much, much closer to people. So I think by the time we go into the referendum, people will be more informed about the BBI. And like I said, if you oppose the BBI because your contributions are not in, you don't need to go to vote, because you also didn't go to give your opinion. So let those who voted, let those who gave the opinion go and confirm that they really gave the opinion. But you cannot have sat 2 years to wake up on the referendum day to play the prefect of the nation. No.
All right. As we go through that journey, and politicians will be the ones spearheading this process, obviously, what would you tell them on what they should know and what they shouldn't do, so that we do not miss the point when it comes to either adopting or not adopting the BBI?
I think politicians must understand that the only purpose the BBI was initiated, Building Bridges Initiative, is to achieve peace and unity and cohesion. Without peace, unity, and cohesion, we have instability. Capital fears instability. Without capital, there is no growth. So opposing the BBI is opposing the development of the Republic of Kenya. There is even a law in Kenya. I think there's something like if you behave in a manner likely to cause a breach of peace, then you've committed an offense. So opposing the initiative of peace
You're
is
not
behaving.
going there. You're not going there. We're not allowing you to go there. You know, Kenyans are entitled to their own
right, but I mean, if you look at it that way,
that they're breaching peace. No. I will not allow you to do that on my show, Tom. Anyway, the 2010 Constitution, you know, people have termed it as the most progressive document that really promised, you know, very many things to transform this country into a better Kenya.
Yes.
What would you say are some of the missed opportunities that even as we are having conversations to amend the Constitution, if we sail through with this and we have a new document, we shouldn't repeat the same mistakes? What are some of these missed opportunities that we should learn from?
No, Kenyans are just an impatient society, for whatever reason. Look at them on the street, in the road, they always want to overtake, driving. They're just impatient. The 2010 Constitution is a seriously improved constitution from the 1963 one. That was actually also written to address inequality, marginalization and all that, right? So when we created devolution was exactly to address that, to address the issue of marginalization, to create more wealth. Now what missed with that is the BBI, because to create wealth you need stability. Because we had 2010 Constitution, but we still had instability in 2017. So I think people must understand that. So the BBI is to create the gaps, to fill the gaps that were left by 2010. What I would say is that the 2010 Constitution, and the BBI is an addendum. The BBI bills are an addendum to the 2010 Constitution anyway. You know, so it's a good thing. It's a good thing. But written Constitution alone does not change us. We must also, as Kenyans, strive to change, accept our country, love our country, right? Do away with all those negative things that impact us from growing, you know, avoid incessant and unnecessary toing and froing and quarrels and divisiveness that are really meaningless, you know. Yes.
All right, Tom Ojanga, thank you so much for creating time for us.
Thank you.
Tom is the regional coordinator for KANU in Nyanza and also the president of Kenya Swiss Society. Thank you so much for coming this morning, shedding some light on some political matters shaping the news in the country. We have unpacked the BBI, just tracing the journey of the BBI train. Will it reach its destination? That is the question many are still asking, as the BBI train is facing quite a number of issues along the tracks towards the destination. Now, we just want to wrap up this particular program, but it's not over yet. We are paving way for the Swahili version of the program, Tamrini. Suleiman Nieri will be taking you through that. My name is Serfine Achieng Ouma, and our sign language interpreter has been Lucy Mwaura.
Muone Faisal ndio huyu aliwekelea bid ya TV na ndio hii anaenda nayo. Faisal, hebu tuambie ni vipi uliwekelea bid?
Nilienda kwenye website ya Quickbid. Nikatizama nikachagua kuwekelea kwenye TV. Sasa niliwekelea mara 3. Nikaja kwa mshindi, nikakutana bid yenye imenifanya kwa niko mshindi ilikuwa ni 168. Sasa leo nimekaitwa nikaja nichukue TV yangu.
Haya Faisal, mali yako.
Tukusaidie.
Asante.
Jiunga na Quickbid ni